Hello everyone and welcome to the Sidereal Insights Astro update for July 15th, 2019. Sorry for our late start today. We just had some last minute issues with the camera setup and had to kind of start from scratch. But welcome. So every 2 weeks on the broadcast, what we do is we explore the current planetary transits across the heavens from a Western sidereal perspective. And so if you need to look up your sidereal sign placements to follow along, you'll want to do that. And there is a handy online calculator that you can use to look them up for free if you don't know them already. So what I'm going to do just real quick is pull up the broadcast in my feed here and give you a link to that calculator for anyone who might need it. We are going to be talking about some specific signs and degrees in today's broadcast, and you might just want to be able to follow along with that. But thanks for joining me. It's good to have you on, Danielle. Thanks for being patient while we had a little bit of our late start there. So for those of you who are new to the broadcast, I'm 𝘱𝘭𝘢𝘢. I'm the astrologer and artist of Mystic Physick Astrology, and I use Western sidereal astrology in my practice. And really the idea is to provide guidance on how you can consciously use the energy of the transiting planets to affect your life in a positive way. And so we're glad to have you on the broadcast. There's a lot to talk about today, but please feel free to like and share the broadcast. Tag a friend if you know someone who might be interested in what we'll be talking about today. And you can also follow Mystic Physick Astrology on Facebook, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about the full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius. We're going to be talking a bit about what's coming up with Venus. She's got a lot of activity coming up in the next week and a half or so. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the new moon in Cancer coming up at the end of July. So there's a lot going on astrologically that we can cover. What I want to do first is kind of recap where we are currently with our transits and our retrogrades to kind of refresh that for you if you haven't, if you need maybe kind of a little refresh on what's going on there. So we have a lot of planets retrograde right now. Jupiter we have currently retrograde in Scorpio, Jupiter being the ruler of course of our full moon. We have Saturn and Pluto retrograde in Sidereal Sagittarius. We have Neptune retrograde in Sidereal Aquarius. That just began last month. And then we had Mercury station retrograde on the 7th this month to add to all of that. So retrograde Mercury in Sidereal Cancer, he'll back up into Gemini for a little bit and then come back into Cancer for the remainder of his tour. So slow down, take a deep breath, cool your jets. It's eclipse season on top of retrograde season, and that just means that things are in a state of flux. Some areas of life we might be struggling to move forward in, especially move forward as quickly as we'd like in terms of feeling like we're making some progress. This is an adjustment period. So don't try and force things. Don't be in a hurry to try to push through. Just give everything time to play out. Take a deep breath and just kind of give yourself a breather and a moment to adjust to the types of changes that may be showing up for you depending on how affected you are by the different planetary retrogrades and how affected you are by the eclipses that we have going on in July. So especially slow progress in any area of life that might be ruled by one of our retrograde planets, or any area of your life where you're having a transit of one of those planets by retrograde. And so here's where it's important to know what your sidereal rising sign is, because then you can look to those signs, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Aquarius, and Cancer, to get a better idea of where things may be ripe for just taking a pause right now. Okay, but let's talk a little bit about how you can use the retrograde specifically, because they are an opportunity to just take a different approach in that particular area of life. When we have Jupiter retrograde, this is generally a good time to take advantage of an opportunity for a do-over, where you might have been doing a lot of growth or development, learning or expansion in a particular area of life. Take a step back and maybe do an assessment of what all you've come to understand in a new way, or what new information or knowledge you've acquired, and have a look at how that influences how you perceive, like the big picture idea, your perspective, and see if that doesn't make a difference in how you want to proceed going forward. When we have Saturn retrograde, this is really where we're usually coming up against an unmet obligation or an outstanding commitment that we have. So definitely take some time to move forward as much as you can, or to determine new ways that you can work to meet those commitments, those responsibilities that you have, so that when Saturn moves forward, you can move forward with a little bit less frustration, maybe a little bit less holding back of your ability to make progress, because you won't have those commitments and obligations hanging over your head, so to speak. With Pluto retrograde, this is a prime opportunity for doing some kind of deep inner healing and transformation, where you have Pluto in your chart or where you have Pluto transiting your chart. And so that can be really, really dramatic, deep, powerful, influential change. Sometimes it's very painful change, and it often accompanies a complete breaking down of whatever the existing paradigm was, so that we can build it completely anew in a way that better fits our new understanding or our new place as we've gone through deep inner healing. With Neptune retrograde, so Neptune retrograde tends to reveal hidden information or secrets, things that you maybe previously have been misled about, whether that's intentionally or unintentionally, whether that's you misleading yourself, things around like disillusionment, that sort of thing. This is where the truth can kind of come out, or maybe the more accurate perspective can be unveiled to us, like the blinders are being taken off, and now we can really see more clearly what wasn't as clear before, or what was hidden from us before. And when that happens, you really have an opportunity to kind of integrate this new understanding, this new reality, if you will, so that you can take a better approach moving forward, one that is going to serve you and serve those around you in a lot more fulfilling way. But this is a time when you can get into unconscious beliefs, unconscious motivations, things that are maybe like hidden motivations for you and the people around you. So look at what you can uncover and what you can learn from that information. And definitely with Mercury retrograde, of course, we're doing a lot of revising of more recent work potentially, or maybe rehashing some conversations, discussions, negotiations that maybe we thought we had already worked through. Those things may be up for change and adjustment right now while Mercury is retrograde. For Mercury retrograde, definitely bust out your Mercury retrograde survival guide, because that'll give you a little more specific way that you can approach dealing with the Mercury retrograde depending on what house he's falling into in your sidereal natal chart. So you're looking for your Cancer chart, and then he will be retrograde in Gemini for about 10 days, which may bring up a revisiting of things that took place the last time he was in those final degrees of Gemini. So watch for that to be coming up as well. And then, of course, eclipse season, which is really a period of tremendous change for us. This is right now in July, the third set of eclipses in the Gemini Sagittarius series, culminating next year in July of 2020. Starting at the beginning of the month when we had our new moon solar eclipse in Gemini, and then going into our full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, which is coming up just in the coming day. So with the full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius this past week and the coming week are the most intense in terms of when we're likely to see activity triggered by the eclipse, or hear whatever news the eclipse might have to deliver for us. So that's the week that the 2-week period that you really want to keep a strong eye on. And then there are some additional dates where we can continue to see eclipse events or eclipse news come up for us. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But yes, you want to watch for more news in this particular series in the coming months, all the way through mid-September. This set of eclipses will be active, and then as we move further into this eclipse series through the middle of next year, that'll help move those of us who are affected by this dramatic process of change triggered by the eclipses, kind of move through and adjust to that change and find ourselves in more comfortable and more settled in new territory as we come out the other end of it. But there are a couple of videos on the website you can watch if you're interested in learning more about that particular eclipse series, and if you're interested in learning more about just eclipses in general and how you can navigate them and what you need to know about them. I can leave some links for you for those blog posts so that you can learn more if you need a refresher on that. But what it really means is that individually and collectively, we're kind of feeling all this cumulative influence of the outer planet retrogrades, Mercury retrograde, and then these 2 eclipses just kind of throwing things into a state of flux and uncertainty. And for folks who really like to exist in a little more certainty, a little more structure, that can be really, really challenging. But it's definitely not a time to be forcing things. So anywhere where you might be encountering obstacles or slowdowns or uncertainty, just take a step back, slow down, meet matters with an open mind, with a receptive attitude even towards alternate possible solutions or other ways forward. Try not to get attached to a particular idea about how things should be or how they ought to be or how things should move forward, right? And if you are feeling attached to those ideas, if you try to force things or impose your will, be prepared that things might not work out the way that you really want them to if you try to do that. That could lead to your disappointment. So just try and take some time to observe and understand, you know, what is, and then get clear about what you want and move forward between those two places. Just focus on what's the gap between where are you and where you want to be, and do what you can do to bridge that and let outside circumstances be what they are. But you're probably noticing a lot of tension right now, especially if you're affected by these eclipses, and we'll go over just in a few minutes who is most likely to be. But if you're being affected by these eclipses, you're gonna be noticing a lot more tension in the houses that they activate, Gemini and Sagittarius. This is totally, totally normal. And this tension will be mostly over by late August, mid-September, after these two eclipses have run their course. So just kind of keep your eye on that window of time and know that it'll ease up as we move through, okay? But I'll give you links to those two videos after I hop off the broadcast here. So right now we have the Sun in Sidereal Gemini just for a few more days before it moves into Cancer. We have Mercury in Cancer, we have Mars in Cancer, so a lot of Cancer activity going on. We had Mercury move into Cancer towards the second half of last month, and he's parked there with the exception of this 10-day break where he backs up into Gemini, 9.5 weeks, which is a really exceptionally long time to host Mercury in a sign, and it's due to the retrograde. So be aware of that, especially if you have Cancer Sun or Cancer Rising. Pay attention, because with Mercury retrograde in your sign, you're more likely going to feel that expression more personally than perhaps other people around you, except for maybe the Geminis and Virgos out there, right? But aside from that brief 10-day reprieve beginning on the 27th of July and lasting through August 5th, Cancer folks, strap in, this retrograde is yours. If you need a refresher on that, like I said, definitely check your Mercury retrograde survival guide to kind of like get you up to speed on what you need to be knowing right now. But the retrograde in Cancer can bring up ideas and issues for us personally around things like motherhood, our own mothers, nurturing, this sense of home. Issues can come up where maybe we need more emotional connection, we have a greater need for emotional security, and ideas around family or clan or home and what those things mean at the core might be coming up at this time. And that can make it, in Cancer, in a water sign, that can make it an emotional Mercury retrograde, even though Mercury is generally who we look to for intellect. It can make it an emotional retrograde, but it really highlights that there's an opportunity here to kind of intellectualize our emotional response and maybe understand it a little bit better on that level, and to then communicate our feelings better. We can look at our own emotional responses through a lens of logic, right? And then hopefully be able to communicate what we understand or what we know or what our own emotional truth is without actually being sucked into that emotion. That's the ideal way that we can navigate this energy. You can also use it as an opportunity to reconcile with a mother figure or a woman in your life, or to deal with doing some healing of wounds around home or family, if that's the case. But definitely use this particular retrograde to take a look at whether your needs are being met in the house that Cancer occupies in your natal chart. And with Cancer, these are often core emotional needs, especially around nurturing and security and being cared for, right? So look at the house that Cancer occupies in your chart and consider whether you have unmet needs in that area, and also look to other planets that you have there. Specifically, what I'd like you to do is consider whether having your needs met in your Cancer house could also help you find greater fulfillment in the house or houses ruled by any planets that you have in Cancer, okay? And then also, alternatively, you can look to your moon placement, with the moon being, of course, the ruler of Cancer, and consider whether getting your needs met in that area of life where you find the moon in your chart if that could help you feel more secure and more nurtured in your Cancer house. Okay, so these are some ways that you can take a look at your own chart and use this particular Mercury retrograde to do some of your own work if you choose to. And then of course with Mars in Cancer, this kind of triggers a little bit extra activity around domestic activities and around issues ruled by Cancer, so nurturing, motherhood, home, domestic matters. And this lasts through early September. Now, where we have some benefit here is with Mars being in Cancer at the same time we have the Mercury retrograde there. He's going to give us an added level of energy and drive to being able to revise and rework and come up with new approaches in that particular area of life, Cancer, right? But with the moon being the ruler, just be aware that your energy levels can really fluctuate when Mars is in Cancer. So be sure to take care of your own energy levels, get enough rest when you know you need to take a break and get some rest, and then just do as much as you can do when your energy levels are a little bit higher. And then of course we also have Venus in Gemini until July 24th. So that's where Venus is at right now. But right now, this is a time when we find ourselves like really fully within the mid-year eclipse season. And so this particular eclipse season is a period that can really affect our thinking and our beliefs. It can bring opportunities for travel, and that can be near or far, okay? It can put us in touch with other people. So that could be family, it could be colleagues, it could be friends, old friends or new friends. These two eclipses in July on the 2nd and the 16th activate the Gemini-Sagittarius axis. And so that influences mental activity and highlights travel-related themes for us, especially in the world at large. And then also for folks who are really directly affected by the eclipses. So Danielle says, hoping the Mars, Sun, Venus trines to Jupiter in early August helps these eclipses out. Danielle, it would be nice if that's the case. I'll have to take a closer look at which transits you're referring to. They may help us as we're moving through the changes. I wouldn't necessarily say they can help us with the outcomes. In terms of having those influences help us with the outcomes, I'd really rather see them affecting the ruler of either eclipse. Because that's really what tells us what the outcome will be like, is the condition of the ruler of either the new moon or the full moon eclipse. Okay, but eclipses are really powerful lunations. They're a lot stronger than a normal new or full moon, and so that's an important thing to remember. They bring upheaval, they bring change, they expose secrets and hidden information, and this is usually information that we needed to have access to, but we haven't had access to, and if we did, we might have made a different decision, or we might have taken a different course of action, and that's why it's such a good idea to slow down and just kind of hold off until this information comes up for you. But they can bring beginnings and endings. So this is when new people come into our lives or old people leave our lives. The kind of change that eclipses bring is really change that's beyond our ability to control. We just kind of have to adjust to it, for better or for worse. And it's usually change related to something that we've been holding on to for far too long, or change that we've been resisting in our lives that we really have been needing to. Yes, so we're going to talk about Jupiter a little bit more when I get to the full moon, Danielle, and also tonight in the full moon releasing practice, we're going to talk about that. Mihail says, so Mercury, ruler of the eclipse, with Mars makes the eclipse worse. So that's an interesting thing that you bring up, Mihail. There is a lot of water, fire energy built into this particular eclipse, and water signs and fire signs aren't necessarily the most compatible, and so we have fiery planets in watery places, and so to me what that says is a potential for a bubbling, like a boiling over of tempers, even with Mercury and Mars tangled. I could see the potential for a rehashing of old arguments, right? Especially with Mercury being retrograde. So things that maybe you thought you had sorted, discussions, heated discussions even, that you thought you'd already resolved, could be coming back up because they really weren't resolved earlier and we didn't realize it. In that sense, it could make our experience of the eclipse more challenging. We have a a Jupiter-Mars aspect going on with this eclipse as well. And to me, that says that we might feel a lot more driven, but we also might feel a lot more driven, have our own way, with Jupiter kind of augmenting that nature of Mars to want what Mars wants, right? And to try to push for it. That can make it a bit more challenging. I do think there are positive things that we can focus on with this particular eclipse as well. But really, keep your schedules free and open right now. That's the best thing that you can do. Keep your plans flexible. That way you can better react to unexpected changes, which are bound to come up right now. You also want to keep room in your itinerary and your schedule for delays or reschedules, detours. You tend to have a lot of canceled appointments during Mercury retrogrades, so something to keep in mind if you do a lot of business by appointment. Expect cancellations. In fact, going forward, I would say try not to schedule things during Mercury retrograde. Use that to catch up on work that you've left unfinished, right? But like with all eclipse periods, don't be issuing any ultimatums right now because they can backfire really badly. And if you can, try and hold off on making important decisions until after the eclipses run their course, and that way you can be more confident that any information that you didn't have access to has had much more of a chance to come up before you do have to commit to a course of action or a decision. Just give yourself room to maneuver is basically what it comes down to. But let's talk a little bit more specifically about this particular full moon lunar eclipse that we're coming up into tomorrow, which is the one you were referring to, Danielle. Oh, and Michiel, actually too, one more thing I wanted to touch on. What makes this particular time frame even more nuanced, aside from the fact that we have an eclipse right now, Mars during these last couple of weeks, as the July eclipses have been playing out, has been transiting the same degree of the full moon lunar eclipse in Cancer that we had in the second half of January. And anytime we have Mars transit an eclipse degree, it reactivates that eclipse, and not necessarily comfortably. I like the way that Susan Miller describes it, is like Mars is scraping the scab off of a wound, basically, and that's very much how it can play out. And so for folks who were affected by that particular eclipse, there's kind of a double whammy thing going on right now. And so it would be worth having a look at where our January full moon lunar eclipse, where that hit your chart, to see if you have any planets or personal points that are at or aspecting that particular degree of Cancer. And I don't remember what it is off the top. I can definitely check when I hop off the broadcast and post a comment so that you'll know where to check in your chart. But that's another issue that Mars is bringing up for certain people right now as well. So there's kind of a two eclipse dynamic going on right now in that sense. This particular full moon in Sagittarius, the eclipse is at 29 minutes, or excuse me, 29 degrees 3 minutes. That's the Fagan-Bradley Sidereal zodiac that we're using there. And this is really kind of an emotional full moon, and emotions can run really high at this particular full moon, partly because it's an eclipse and that exaggerates things, partly because it's in Jupiter's sign, right? And Jupiter's in one of the water houses right now, or water signs right now. Plus we have Jupiter and Mars feeding off each other in those water signs, in Scorpio and Cancer. And so this full moon really kind of sets the stage for dramatic endings potentially, or for dogmatic conflicts to be coming to a head. Political and religious matters are likely to be hot button issues just kind of in the world at large right now, and cultural differences are probably being highlighted for some of us. And really with this full moon, I would say that stalling tactics may be called for, right? Especially if you need to make an important decision or take a significant course of action like we were talking about before, just to kind of buy yourself time. So if you need to stall, do what you can to stall. That's likely only going to benefit you in the long run. Remember, eclipses reveal things, and you want to know whatever they have to show you. But this full moon brings new challenges into the mix. It's kind of this weird, awkward sort of second chance to things that weren't fully resolved at last month's full moon. But at the same time, with this full moon, the final outcome of whatever's coming up for us individually may not really be settled right away, because we have the ruler of the full moon retrograde, plus we have Mercury retrograde and affecting this as well. Okay, so know that you could use this full moon to go back and finish something that or to make corrections to something that you thought you had finished, especially maybe something that you had been trying to wrap up last month. And that's a perfectly fine thing to do if that poses no real difficulty in your particular situation. Or if you have Mercury retrograde in your natal chart even, then it would be less of a concern to be going back in and finishing something up right now, okay? But you can also use it as an opportunity to really make improvements as you go along, okay? So that's where I would focus. Or to pick up the threads of something, like say you started a project or an issue, you started something and never quite got it finished. So if you wanted to go pick the threads back up and make it like a second drive to see it through to the end, you could do that now. That would be another way that you could use this full moon. But like I said, try to focus on things where it's not really super critical for you, just because we have such a significant situation with the eclipses going on. I would hate for you to try and finalize something that's super important or super critical for you and then have it not work out the way that you're hoping. So I would focus on maybe the things of lesser importance right now, things that it's not so critical if something changes or shifts for you later on down the road. But if something were to come to an end right now, it's possible that it's not really a true and permanent ending the way we would normally expect from an eclipse. And that is in partly because we have Mercury retrograde and partly because we have Jupiter retrograde as ruler of the eclipse, right? But this really suggests that there's a possibility in the future, perhaps, for reconciliation or repair or renewal of something. If you have Sagittarius rising, Sagittarius sun, a planet or point at 29 degrees of Sag, Gemini, Virgo, or Pisces, then the experiences that are going to be brought up by this eclipse will be more challenging, okay? But they'll also bring greater growth and learning potential. So that's an important thing to know. You'll probably have to learn something or learn something from or as you deal with whatever that challenge is that comes up for you. If this is you, the eclipse degree is also going to be reactivated for you at the full moons in October of this year and January, April, and July of next year. Okay? So this particular eclipse will be reactivated at those full moons. October, January, April, and July. Okay? If you have a planet or point at 29 degrees of Aries, Leo, Libra, or Aquarius, this will be a little bit less challenging eclipse for you. But the caveat there is that it requires a more conscious and more intentional effort on your part, more intentional action on your part if you want to use the eclipse energy, okay? So you just have to try a little bit harder, because it's easy to just kind of write it and let the status quo be what it is when you are dealing with 29 degrees of Aries, Leo, Libra, or Aquarius, because you have such a helpful aspect to the eclipse degree, okay? And if that's you, 29 degrees of Aries, Leo, Libra, or Aquarius, then this particular eclipse degree gets reactivated at full moons in September and November, and again at the full moons in March and May of next year, okay? Those are the full moons that you'll want to keep an eye on. And then coming up just after our eclipse, Venus goes through several successive aspects, kind of one after another, over a period of about a week. And so this particularly will be felt by folks with Taurus sun or Taurus rising, or Libra sun or Libra rising, or if you just have a lot of planets in one of those signs in your chart, expect that you might be feeling the repercussions of what's going on with Venus in the coming week and a half or so. So at midweek this week, she's going to be opposing Saturn, and that's that's one of the more unpleasant transits of Venus, really. At the same time that she's moving into a trine with retrograde Neptune. And so what this can do is it could trigger potentially difficulties in love, difficulties in partnerships, difficulties with money, financial challenges, limitations. It could bring up expenses for some folks. It can trigger kind of a bit of melancholy, really, is what it can do. And with that Neptune aspect coming in, it can be really easy to just kind of slip into a desire for escapism, to just kind of avoid the discomfort of what Saturn is bringing up for us in that opposition to Venus. And so that's really, you're going to feel that the strongest over the 17th and 18th, so keep an eye on those days. And then going into the weekend, we're having Venus move into an opposition with Pluto as she's entering Cancer, and then coming into a conjunction with Mercury. So this can trigger kind of clashes of will, really, in partnerships. This can trigger opposition to authority, especially when it comes to what we consider is important. If someone else doesn't consider that important, well, to heck with them, right? It can bring up this type of an attitude. It can also trigger changes in priorities, right? There might be power struggles over things like money or resources, or an unwillingness to compromise. Okay, so watch for that. And then as she moves into Cancer and comes into conjunction with Mercury, that can shift us into, it's more of, I want to say, of a romanticism, right? A desire for home and family connections, for that kind of familiarity, maybe even a refocusing on family values. It can make us feel much more nurturing, and really trigger feelings of appreciation, especially around home and family and what's familiar. We may be a little bit more emotionally sensitive too, so keep that in mind. But with Mercury being in the mix, especially retrograde, this might give us an opportunity for some emotional expression there, which could be very healthful and healthy, and also an opportunity to really re-examine our priorities. And that's important to do occasionally, right? So use Mercury's retrograde conjunct to Venus to really re-examine your priorities, because then you can make adjustments at this point in time if that's really necessary for you to move you forward in a better direction. And that's, you're going to feel that most strongly from the 21st through the 24th-ish is when we have that series of Venus activity going on, where she opposes Pluto and then moves into Cancer as she's about to conjoin Mercury. Okay, and then later this month on the 27th, I believe, we're going to have Mercury retrograde back into Gemini, like I said, for that 10-day window. So watch for that. And then at the very end of the month, we have our new moon in Cancer, right when Mercury's going to station direct. So that's our third and final lunation this month, kind of a busy lunar month, July is. That new moon is going to be unpredictable in several ways. It's coming just as Mercury stations direct, which is generally a time when Mercury's behavior is really unpredictable and erratic. So you have that to factor in, right? That's our friend the messenger planet is going to be acting up near that new moon. He's going to station opposite Pluto in Sagittarius, okay? And so what that's going to do is trigger Pluto's transformative influence right at the new moon, okay? And so for anyone who's using Mercury's retrograde to revise or to rework past efforts, those changes could show signs of bearing fruit right around that new moon, even though that's not normally when we look to bear fruit. But with Pluto triggering those changes, that's when you could really be seeing how those changes are going to be playing out, okay? And then on top of that, this new moon at the end of the month on the 31st is square Uranus, okay? Uranus is the planet of surprises, the planet of sudden events, right? So even more significant with the moon ruling this lunation from her home sign of Cancer, and then the new moon is going to reactivate the July 2nd eclipse degree, okay? On top of all that, the new moon is going to reactivate the July 2nd eclipse degree. So you're going to want to watch the 31st, you're going to want to watch August 2nd, those 2 dates specifically, for potentially more eclipse news, okay? And that's especially true if you have a planet or point at 15 or 16 degrees of an air or a fire sign. So check those points in your charts. Okay, but all told, because with all those factors playing into it, the July 31st new moon in Cancer is going to be quite unpredictable. And the outcome of any endeavor you begin at that new moon is probably going to be really unexpected in some way. Okay, emotional volatility could be part of the picture. All right, Venus is widely conjunct the moon at that new moon and square Uranus herself. And so there's a real opportunity. This is kind of the fun spin of it. There's a real opportunity for unexpected pleasure and delight. Okay, that's a new moon to really tap into spontaneity and enjoyment. So be sure to do something fun at the new moon at the end of July, especially if an opportunity to do something fun kind of arises right out of the blue. Okay, but initiations made at that time could really be truly visionary in nature. They could bring radical or cutting edge results. Even though you might want to give the moon a few days before making your initiation to reveal whatever surprises she might have in store for you before you take concrete action. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining me. Be sure to join me tonight at 7:30 Mountain, 9:30 Eastern. Oh my goodness, I don't remember my time zones all of a sudden. I think that's like 2:30 in the morning British summertime. And gosh, I don't remember what time it is in Australian time, folks. Sorry about that. But our full moon in Sagittarius, releasing practice is going to be tonight at 7:30. So join me for that in the Sidereal Insights community. And then also, like I said, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the notification bell. That way you always get notifications whenever I publish a broadcast, because I don't always get an email out to you in a timely manner, but I always get these uploaded to YouTube, and that way you'll never miss a broadcast. Danielle says thank you. Oh, you're very, very welcome. And please follow us on Facebook and like and share the broadcast, tag a friend if you know someone, and we'll see you again later this evening, and then catch us again for the next Sidereal Insights Astro update in 2 weeks. Bye again.